揽投资国内专业的互联网理财平台，收益超银行活期数倍，已为众多用户带来丰厚收益。揽投资理财新选择，
源于民族之心，兴于品质之巅，成于健康之路。有爱有缘有三元。
Yes, you mentioned about China. China is going to be the host next year in Hangzhou. So I wonder what kind of contribution China can do for the summit.
Oh, I think that the Chinese summit could be a tremendous success. But I will tell you what I think that could happen at the Chinese summit. I think there are two things that are required. One is the Chinese summit should deal with the issues at hand. I'll give you two such issues. The two handshake agreements between the presidents of China and the President of the United States. The handshake agreement a number of months ago on climate change. The fact is that they both shook hands, they both agree that climate change is an issue that has to be dealt with. We're now going into the Turkish summit. Following that, we're going to have the Paris climate change agreement. I would love it. I think we all would love it if there was a complete agreement on climate change at that meeting. I suspect there are going to be a lot of details to work out under the best of circumstances. The year ahead is when those details will be worked out, leading into the Chinese summit. And I cannot think of a greater impetus for success than the fact is that a powerful nation like China will be holding that summit. There's another thing that can be done, and I think that this is equally important. The G20, unlike the G7, is not a series of nations with the same kinds of economies and the same kinds of political system. The G20 is made up of many political systems and many kinds of economies. And what that means is that they need the great multilateral institutions to bind their decisions together. And the fact is that if you take a look at the multilateral decisions at the present time, multilateral institutions at the present time, there are major difficulties. I only have to ask you to take a look at the IMF for one example. And I'd like in the course of the interview, I hope we can get into some of the others. But if you take right now the IMF, as a result of the reluctance of the U.S. Congress to go along with the quota and governance reforms, is in some trouble. The IMF was in trouble going into this as a result of what some people have said was rather harsh treatment towards the nations during the Asian crisis, as compared to, for instance, the treatment of European nations, which got into some trouble later on. And so for the IMF not to be able to reform itself is a fundamental issue, because there can only be one monetary anchor, and that is the IMF, and it cannot be subject to the whim of any individual country. And that's the situation now. So I would really hope the IMF and some other institutions which I'd like to talk about, I think have got to be reformed. That reformation will only take place if the G20 acts.
Right now, people are talking about the SDR. China is going to join the RMB. So, since just following your comments, I want to know your idea about that.
Well, but you've got a very optimistic statement, a very favorable statement coming out just within the last couple of days from the IMF, and so it's quite clear that that's well underway.
So you are also very optimistic about that.
Yes.
And also, I want you review the target, the 2014 summit gave in Brisbane summit, which suggests that 2% additional growth until 2018. Is that too optimistic?
We now know it was too optimistic. I mean, this is part of the problem that is really taking place, is that the G20 has called for cooperation to get growth going the last number of of these conferences, and in fact the nations have not taken the steps that are required. And what it has demonstrated is that in fact the G20 on numerous occasions has called for levels of growth which have not been attained. The levels of growth that were called for in Brisbane have not been attained. Turkey's summit has made a major step forward in making inclusive growth essentially an important part of the summit. We'll see what the discussions are there.